Did you just get your SAT score back and are you wondering if it's a good score or not? Or maybe you're taking the SAT soon and you have no idea what kind of a score you need to get into colleges that you want to attend? If so, in this video, I'm going to talk through lists of colleges that are the kind of schools that you can get into with particular ranges of SAT scores. So remember, you can always read instead of watch, or if you just want to check out all the data tables that I'm sharing with you here in our video, you can see them for yourself at our blog, supertutortv.com/college/goodsat2021. Cool, so let's talk about what a good SAT score is in 2021. Now, this year is an unprecedented admission season. As many of you know, over 90% of top 200 colleges are going to be test optional or test blind this year. So the data sets that I'm going to use for all of my graphs and charts are from the class of 2020. So those are all the kids that applied before the pandemic hit and then had to decide whether or not to attend college after pandemic had sort of transpired. Now, the class of 2021 experienced the most competitive college admission season we've ever seen in our lives, and also we're the first kind of round of test optional people. We don't really have all the data back yet from that year. And because it was test optional, a lot of times the 25th percentile is going to be kind of screwy because you only have people submitting scores who have really great scores, and you have a lot of people who took the test and were only able to take it once instead of 3 times like they are in other years. So that data might not be as reliable in terms of what schools see as a good score. So we're going to go back to this class of 2020 data, and I'm going to use that as kind of a baseline for saying, one, not only what a good score is, but also the other thing I'm going to talk about is when you should submit or not submit, depending on what your score is. My response to that is, first, make sure you know whether or not your college is test optional. We have a whole video on where the SAT is required, and I recommend that you check that out as well. But in general, if you're above the 25th percentile on both sections, I would consider submitting your score. Anybody who scores at least at the 50th percentile of these percentiles that I'm going to go over, I recommend that you submit your score even if they're test optional. If you're from an underrepresented group, say you're the first in your family to go to college or you're an underrepresented minority, I would also consider sending your scores if you're close to the 25th percentile, even if you're not exactly there. Now, again, like I said, many colleges are going to be test blind or test optional. Note that the test blind schools, namely the UCs and Caltech, aren't going to look at your test score at all. So if those are the places you're applying, you can forget about test scores. But for everybody else, these can be a metric that can help you get into college, even if they're not required. So let's get into this. The first thing I'm going to talk about is what's an average SAT score. So for the class of 2020, the average SAT score, according to the College Board, was a 1051. That's about low 500s kind of score, maybe a 510, maybe a 520 in each section, 530. That's kind of what we're looking at for average. And if you have an average SAT score, these are the kind of schools that you can get into. Central Michigan University, Texas State University, University of Toledo, Sam Houston State University, University of South Alabama, Georgia State, Colorado Mesa University, Old Dominion, Indiana State University, and Rocky Mountain College. Like I said, because we're test optional at a lot of programs right now, you could probably get into these schools with no SAT score, but know if you have a score that's in the low to mid 500s, you should probably submit it because it can make you a competitive candidate for one of these colleges. Okay, next we're going to talk about above average. An above average SAT score means that you're generally scoring kind of in the 500s, the high 500s, maybe the low 600s. On each section. Colleges that are open to you, if that's kind of your score range, would be the University of New Hampshire, University of Oregon, Temple University, Louisiana Tech, Northern Arizona, North Dakota State, University of West Florida, UNLV, Wichita State, University of New Mexico, University of Massachusetts at Boston, and Kent State. Now, just a heads up, all these colleges that I'm listing out, this is just a representative sample. There are plenty of other colleges and universities in the United States that would accept scores in this range, but I'm just giving you a sampling of the kind of colleges and universities that you can get into with that kind of a score. And remember that admissions are holistic, so scores are only one piece of the puzzle, especially this year with test optional. They are one piece of the puzzle that helps you kind of get into these colleges and universities. Okay, now let's talk about a good score. A good score, we're looking at probably a 1250 on average or above. I want to see kind of mid 600s, maybe even 1300s. We're getting into the 1300s here. But high 1200s, 1300s composite, University of Delaware, University of Connecticut, Texas A&M, Drexel, Lewis and Clark, University of Denver, Penn State, Marquette, University of Colorado Boulder, Indiana University, University of South Carolina, University of Iowa, Michigan State, and University of Arizona. Now, at many of these schools that I just mentioned, once we kind of get into the good range, if you have an even higher SAT score, you can often qualify for honors programs or for scholarships or things like this at these kind of schools where a good SAT score will get you in, but a great one might get you money for college. All right, next up is a very good SAT score. So a very good SAT score, we're looking in the range of around 1,300 to 1,400 total, maybe even 1,450, right? On average. And if you're in that kind of range, that sort of 1,300s, low 1,400s kind of range, these are the kind of schools that could be open to you. Colgate, Wake Forest, University of Virginia, University of Florida, University of Wisconsin-Madison. As you can see, we're getting into some top 50 schools, some top-ranked public universities, College of William and Mary, UNC Chapel Hill, University of Miami, Ohio State University, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Southern Methodist University, North Carolina State, University of Washington, Purdue University, Pepperdine, UT Austin, University of Georgia. Now, there's some really strong schools on this list. The other thing that I'll say about this kind of very good category is oftentimes I see students with sort of mismatched scores. So you might be the kind of student who has a math score up in the 700s, and maybe your verbal score is more around a 620 or something like that. Some of the schools on this list are going to take you with that kind of lopsided score in this range. The other thing that I'll point out is every program is different. So though I listed off, for example, the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana, the engineering program is probably going to be a lot more competitive than the English program at that kind of a college. So know that when you get into these giant universities with good engineering programs, you also have to be mindful of whether you have a score that's compatible with the particular major or school that you want to apply to. If you're applying to engineering school, just know that you might need to be a little bit higher on the math than what my chart is saying right here, because we're usually doing College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences or the general population. So just a good tip. Okay, now let's get into what a great SAT score is. So a great SAT score is going to start to get you into some of these top 20, top 30 schools. Ideally, I want to see you guys around a 700 or above to be competitive. The 25th percentile at these schools, though, is like a 1,320 to a 1,400. So you've got a shot. If you're in the like high 600s, you might still be okay. And if you can pop a 700 on one section or the other, that's going to make you an even stronger candidate. If you can get above a 1,400, you're definitely kind of in the game here. So we've got University of Notre Dame, Swarthmore, NYU, Georgia Tech, Emory, Case Western, Tufts, Brandeis, Georgetown, Tulane, University of Michigan, Boston University, Wellesley, Boston College, and Villanova. Okay, finally, let's get to an awesome score. What is an awesome SAT score? An awesome SAT score for a top ranking school is going to be a 1550 plus. Those kind of colleges, I want to see 750 plus on all your sections whenever possible. You still are in the ball game if you're over a 700, but I like to see that 750 plus. And for a top 20 school, I want to see a 1500 plus. So you can have that 700, 800 kind of lopsided score if that's what you've got for some of these colleges, but I like to see a 7 in front of everything. And as you can see, there's only a couple of schools on here that their 25th percentile is even below a 700, which is Northeastern and Cornell, and everything else here, you've got to have that 7 up front. We've got MIT, Harvey Mudd, WashU and St. Louis, Carnegie Mellon, Vanderbilt, Rice, University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Brown, Stanford, Duke. Down the line, we've got Dartmouth, Northwestern, Northeastern, Cornell, Amherst, and Williams. Now, there are probably some colleges and universities that didn't make our list that still are highly competitive, like Caltech or like the UCs. Caltech and UCs are test blind this year, so that's why they're not on these lists. Caltech will probably consider tests starting next year. So if you're watching this video and you're not a rising senior, like you're like a junior prepping for the SAT, know that you may also need a high score for Caltech. So there you go, you guys. I hope you guys found this interesting. Again, check out our chart on our blog post if you want more information. And if you have any questions or any thoughts, go ahead and post a comment below. We hope you did well on your SAT, and if you didn't, again, remember you can always check out our online course at SupertutorTV.com, and we've got a couple of books on Amazon for the ACT math section, so be sure to check those out. Subscribe and like this video if you liked it. Also find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We have TikTok videos. and Twitter. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.